Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Now that you're here, we can start discussing Hajime Kashimo as the first entry in a series of videos made to give slept-on characters a little more glaze and the attention they deserve. Does he truly deserve the bad rap that he's been getting from the fans, or is he a legend of the series who just flew too close to the sun? Without further ado, let's get into it. A short primer for this discussion is the concept of stats versus hacks, and what we truly mean when we say a character is stronger than another. I'm sure that some of you won't know what hacks is or have only heard it out of context before. Essentially, hacks is any form of ability or status that invalidates or negates any and all stats of an opponent or themselves. For example, Gojo's Infinity effectively renders the attack potency of any normal fighter worthless against him. It's the very reason why some people argue that he could fight planetary threats like Naruto or even Goku. Just to clarify, when I say that Naruto is stronger than Goku, I mean that he has superior stats, such as attack potency, durability, or movement speed, not necessarily that he'd win in a 1v1 scenario. Other examples of hacks more relevant to this video's topic would be Kinji Hakari's healing and unlimited cursed energy, which basically invalidates his stamina, cursed energy reserves, and all but instantly fatal blows, which give him a great chance of beating people that are stronger than him by their stats. Or Angel's ability to completely negate curses both within cursed objects and cursed techniques themselves. This ability has since been copied by Yuta Akatsu and can even be applied to his domain expansion. These abilities grant their users great power that can contend with opponents that would normally overwhelm them completely. In Yuta's case, even granting him the ability to face off against Ryomen Sukuna for a short time. Even incredibly powerful characters can be slowly worn down by an onslaught of powerful attacks. Unfortunately, this limitation does not apply to Hakari during his jackpot, or, as the manga puts it, when he's worked up. In the Kashimo fight alone, Hakari was able to shrug off at least 3 fatal blows that would have killed him. Which just goes to show how incredible his hacks are when it comes to bridging the gap between him and opponents that are just slightly more powerful than he is. Usually, at least. Now that we've gone over the distinction between raw stats and hacks, I believe we can shift the focus of this discussion towards the character in question, Hajime Kashimo. And first, I'd like to pose the question, is Kashimo really the strongest of the Edo period? Or is that misinformation? I've seen many people cite Kashimo as the definitive strongest from the Edo period, but I've seen no direct statements or confirmation. So instead, let's compare Kashimo to the other Edo period sorcerers that we're aware of, based on the concept that we know A. Kenjaku would have brought any and all powerful Edo sorcerers remaining into the Culling Games, and B. that Kashimo has been personally moving around the country in order to fight all of the strongest sorcerers. First, we can look at the concrete examples that we know for a fact were active during the Edo period. The only 2 sorcerers that we definitively know were active during the Edo period that actually have feats other than Kashimo himself are Kenjaku and Ryu Ishigori. Despite the fact that they both seem to have domain expansions whereas Kashimo doesn't, I believe that Kashimo is definitively stronger than both of them due to how he scales to Yuta Akatsu. There are several sources, both primary and secondary, that support the notion that Hakari is more powerful than Yuta when he gets worked up or is on a roll. Credit to No Operator and his subreddit for compiling them all a few years ago, and I think anyone would be hard-pressed to tell me that Hakari wasn't on a roll against Kashimo when he got to jump him off a jackpot and then proceeded to get several more during the fight itself. Even though Kashimo had little trouble outmaneuvering and landing several killing blows on Hakari, he still lost to the hack's ability Restless Gambler, which allowed him to survive long enough to leverage his superior strategy, luck, and quick wit, as Hakari knew to drop him in the water and eventually was able to get Kashimo into a position to exploit his biggest weakness. Essentially, due to the electric qualities of his cursed energy, Kashimo was forced to leak out all of his remaining cursed energy in order to continue fighting against Hakari. This plan of attack was not without risk, however, as Kashimo decided to lean into the conditions and used all of his remaining energy at once to create a massive explosion that Hakari could only survive by using a binding vow to sacrifice his arm, as we all know. However, After winning the fight, Hakari acknowledges that he didn't truly beat Kashimo in the truest sense, due to him not using his technique at all throughout the fight. In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, it is common for some sorcerers to be born with substandard curse techniques. However, in this case, Hakari is right to make this statement, because according to Gojo when he was training Yuji, a sorcerer's potential is 80% determined at birth. And for the sake of argument, we could safely assume that he means to say that most, if not all of that 80% is dependent on your curse technique due to the context of Yuji and Gojo's conversation. So Kashimo was able to contend with a worked up Hakari for an extended fight and finally lost only due to his biggest weakness being exploited, and through it all, he was only using 20 to 30% of his base potential. I say 20 to 30 instead of definitively 20 because in Kashimo's case, he does have a cursed energy property and a special sure hit lightning attack that most other sorcerers do not have. This line of reasoning places base power Kashimo at least slightly above Hakari and Yuta in terms of stats, in my opinion, due to the consistent statements of Hakari being above Yuta and Hakari only surviving due to his hacks to begin with. However, when I make this statement, I'm not necessarily saying that he could beat them both in a 1v1 scenario. I'm more so scaling combat stats, so both Yuta and Hakari have hacks to have a serious chance at the win despite being weaker fighters. When it comes to battling with no hacks abilities, at least. Now, we've begun to establish that Kashimo is in fact a high-tier fighter in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, but does that make him the strongest of the Edo period? Not as concretely as you'd expect, because according to Gojo in his conversation with Megumi during the baseball episode, in the Edo period, a Limitless Six Eyes user and a Ten Shadows user fought and killed each other. And the official fanbook confirms this by saying it's been about 400 years, which lines up exactly with the beginning of the Edo period. Due to Kashimo's age, we can safely assume that they were all alive at the same time, somewhere along the course of his life. Now, scaling these characters can be dicey due to the total lack of information we have to go on. So I'll pose a simple argument and let you decide if you believe Kashimo is the strongest or not. Megumi assumes that the Ten Shadows user summoned Maharaga to win the battle, which is consistent because both fighters died and Maharaga has never been tamed. The only other plausible explanation, in my opinion, is that the Ten Shadows user had an extremely powerful domain expansion but still managed to die somehow. In either case, it wasn't due to the Ten Shadows user's personal stats that they were able to win. Assuming Maharaga was strong enough to kill both of these sorcerers from the Edo period, all we have to do to cement Kashimo as the strongest of the period is prove that he would be able to deal with Maharaga. 15 Fingers Sukuna and Gojo were both pretty effortlessly able to kill Maharaga with their most powerful moves, the Fire Arrow and Hollow Purple, if it wasn't for Sukuna's interference in the latter case. And when Sukuna was at his most injured and fatigued, while Gojo was at 120% from Black Flash, recovering his output and reverse curse technique, he still wasn't able to finish off Sukuna or dodge the World Slash, and granted Gojo was still somewhat weakened. But Kashimo was actually able to finish off the Megumi form Sukuna with a lightning discharge attack, which forced Sukuna into using his one-time use transformation to heal himself. And after dodging the world-splitting slash that Gojo died to, it wasn't until Sukuna got philosophically interested in the fight that he pulled out several world slashes in order to finally put Kashimo down. Sukuna's new body and his chanting made him much more powerful and amplified his abilities even further compared to what he used against Gojo. This is what forms my opinion that with his curse technique, Kashimo is an extremely high-tier fighter that can even contend with Megumi form Sukuna and a weakened Gojo, in terms of base stats at the very least, and he was able to very quickly dismantle the weakened Megumi form Sukuna with relative ease, despite the fact that he was trying considerably harder than he usually does, based on A, his hype from the fight against Gojo, and B, his use of a curse tool, as well as Urame's interference in the fight. Due to this showing, do you think Kashimo would be able to handle Maharaga? I'd say that anyone who could fight at that level would have no problem with Maharaga, and even though Kashimo can't penetrate the Infinity Barrier, he'd still scale above at least the Edo Six Eyes user in terms of raw stats, as that Six Six Eyes user died to an objectively weaker Ten Shadows user than Gojo did, and Kashimo scales above Maharaga. At least while Kashimo is utilizing mythical beast Amber. So in conclusion, there doesn't seem to be any active sorcerers that were able to challenge the lightning god in his time, which truly validates his decision to come to the modern era to challenge Sukuna, as he claimed the right, just as Gojo did before him, to engage in a battle of the strongest. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Pretty solid proof that Kashimo isn't just a weak farmer from a middling time. He has truly earned a place among the greats in my opinion. Sure, his moveset is lacking in diversity, and he isn't the most tactical character in the series, but when it comes to swapping hands and blowing people up, there's not many as straightforward and potent as Kashimo. After all, he did earn the most points in the culling game, even more than Higuruma, who's considered to be a Gojo level talent by the narrator, and he was just about the only sorcerer to live well into old age. Hell, even Satoru Gojo died before his 30s. Big thanks to all you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you get to join the discussion in the comments and let me know what you think about Kashimo or even general feedback on the video. And I'd love to hear other characters you all think are underappreciated from JJK and other properties too. Alright everybody, stay safe and take it easy.